Why hasn't this moved? Is it just an issue of courage, or are there more fundamental barriers that we have to think about as we think about potentially reinventing this dialogue, not just as a democratic ask, not just as a good thing to do, but the issue we know it is, an issue that evangelicals, the Chamber of Commerce, unions, people across the pragmatic spectrum are in favor of. What is it that keeps it blocked up, despite the fact that groups across the political spectrum have come out in its favor? We have a human issue here. We have people just like us, people who we live with, who deliver our food if you're in New York City, like I am a lot of the time, who work with us in factories, who work with us in offices, who write the articles we read in newspapers. We have people who are sitting at the margins of society. There's a question of human dignity, of the American tradition, what it means to be America, which has always welcomed immigrants. In fact, you can trace back the history of this country. We have had immigration reform nearly every generation. Immigration reform today is as big an issue as it is, in part because we are late with it. Remember, the last comprehensive immigration reform was passed by Ronald Reagan. There was a day when this wasn't this kind of partisan issue, when across the political spectrum people understood the Americanness of the question, and people understood that people who come to this country sort themselves out and become whatever they will be politically, but that the basic American value matters. So remember, when we're talking about this isn't a trivial issue. These are people we're talking about, 10 million or more people who every day sit on the margins of society, in some cases feeling hunted. They're children, women, workers. So let's not forget that. That should be motivation enough. But at the end of the day, if we're going to take advantage of this window, this spring window, let's call it March. If something's going to begin to happen in March, we need to take profound advantage of the next 5 to 10 weeks. We need to step back and ask the evangelical community to aggressively mobilize in the next 5 to 10 weeks to communicate to their constituencies, to their leaders, to people here in Washington, the importance of immigration reform for the evangelical community, for the Catholic Church. We need to ask the business community, the Chamber of Commerce, the technology leaders of this country in the next 5 to 10 weeks to mobilize, to explain the incredible importance of immigration reform to the future of our economy, to our technological leadership around the world. We need to ask Republican leaders, thoughtful Republican leaders, people like Kolarov and others, to begin to communicate the demographic trend, the impossibility of being elected president, the challenge at the state level for governors and senators, the need from a pragmatic political perspective for comprehensive immigration reform. And while that is happening in these next 5 to 10 weeks, we need to redouble our efforts, the peaceful, thoughtful, heartfelt efforts of people who are making the moral argument that says these are our neighbors, these are our co-workers, these are the people whose newspapers we read, who deliver our food, who work with us and for us. If we can mobilize in the next 5 to 10 weeks, a very hard time for the reasons I laid out earlier, because there's other agendas that are being pursued, important other things that are happening. But if we can mobilize these groups in the next 5 to 10 weeks and make those arguments powerfully, then when we find ourselves in late January and early February, we'll have the groundwork laid for the possibility of a spring deal. And if we miss this window, we're talking about a year. We're talking about 2 years. We're talking about maybe another administration. We have to take advantage of these next 5 to 10 weeks, and it has to be a conversation that is rooted in these Republican questions of economic growth, of religious values and religious communities, of pragmatic politics.